Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our May Klamath Film meeting. We have a few guests on via Zoom, as well as here in person, and we will have our featured guest joining in probably about 20, 30 minutes. Jarrett Bryant is our guest tonight. He is a filmmaker and screenwriter based out of Eugene. He won our award for Best Feature Film at our 2021 Klamath Independent Film Festival for his film Maxie, which was shot in Eugene. We have a few announcements and a few things going on, and we always want to leave the start of our meeting open for any sort of networking opportunities, chance for people to talk about anything they may be working on or anything they've watched recently. And we'll save introductions for when our guest gets here. To start off, does anyone have any sort of projects they've been starting to work on film-wise, or anything they want to share for upcoming things or announcements, anything like along those lines? Nina, how's the prep for going to Europe coming along?
It's good. I think I'm physically ready to go, but not mentally quite yet, but leaving next Wednesday.
Fantastic. And how are the puppets? Have they been totally finished?
I have two that I'm still currently working on. I just finished one. I'll put up pictures later once it's gone to the person, because it's for a consignment, a commission piece, and I don't want to show it off until after he gets it.
Totally understandable.
But I just submitted my music video to you guys last night, so that'll be in there for you guys to see. I just finished it last week.
Wonderful. We've been grinding away at going through all of our submissions. June 1st is the deadline for the Klamath Independent Film Festival. So if anyone is working on something or knows someone who has a film that they recently produced, you have another 2 weeks to get your film in. We are still planning what we're going to do for the summer from the Klamath Film side, but we did get a grant to acquire a large projector and screen to go along with our PA system. And we are working on setting up some movies in the park for this summer. So over at Veterans Park, on TBD dates, we'll have announcements for it soon. We will be doing screenings of family-friendly films, probably 2 or 3 times during the summer, and we'll continue that going forward as long as we are able to do so. As far as a summer screening outside of that, we're still have some feelers out. We may or may not do a screening around August. We're looking at end of July to do our student film camp. That's a free 5-day film camp for middle school and high school kids that is taught over at KCC. It's a pretty intensive 5 days, basically trying to cram about a year's worth of film school into 5 days, but it's also lots of fun. We get to do a bunch of group projects. And then at the end of that, we loan out professional film gear for kids to go off and make their first film. And if they make a film in time, it gets included in the film festival. And we will have a screening of our student films on Sunday morning of the film festival. And the film festival this year is September 22nd through the 24th. It will be in person at the Ross Ragland, as well as streaming and on demand online via Eventive as well. So while we give it some time for some more folks to come in, has anyone been working on a project or just saw something really cool recently that they wanted to talk about or share while we have a few minutes? What have people been watching lately, film-wise?
Just went and saw Evil Dead Rising this weekend. It was pretty good.
I'm a huge Bruce Campbell fan. I love the whole Evil Dead series. I basically
me too.
Grew up with Army of Darkness on repeat. So I think I have that entire film memorized at this point.
Have you seen it yet? They did a pretty good job in keeping it true to the story, and I think it's going to be a good continuation since he retired. So
is it still taking more of the comedic horror approach? Because the last Evil Dead remake that they did went straight horror, and I didn't think that was as good.
It was straight horror. It was probably one of the most bloody movies I have seen in a really long time. There was not really any comedy factor at all. It was pretty gruesome, but it was really good.
Terrific.
I went and seen Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, you saw the Dungeons and Dragons film?
Yeah.
Now
It was actually entertaining. I'm not into Dungeons and
Mhm.
Dragons per se, but it was actually
Well,
very
I'm curious,
interesting.
yeah.
The graphics were something out of this world. The
Yeah, I got to
animation.
Now there was a D&D film made in the 90s by Uwe Boll, which automatically means it's terrible. That had Marlon Wayans in it. I'm forgetting who else was in that one, but yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah. But I have heard good things. I have not seen it, but I have heard good things about the Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah,
film.
they have a good amount of humor in it and amazing animation graphics.
Nice. For our folks who worked on Maxi, Josh and Sharon, have you two been working on any sort of new projects that you can share or something in the works upcoming?
Not yet.
How about you, Sharon? Are you working on anything you want to tell us about?
I'm actually a script consultant for
Oh.
PBS Masterpiece.
Oh, wow.
And so Tom Jones just premiered on April 30th. And Sanditon just ended its third season sometime in the end of March. So those are the two main things that I had been working on. But
That's wonderful.
Jarrett and I are friends from the Writers Guild. So right now, I'm
Right,
not doing
right.
anything because we're on.
Yeah, I was curious, and that was one thing I was going to ask Jarrett tonight. If Jarrett is officially on strike at the moment, if being a part of this meeting is technically crossing the picket lines or just kind of something to do for fun.
Yeah, I don't. It's not. It's not.
Okay.
You're nonprofit. You're not part of the part of the evil.
Oh, Anthony is asking if you could please repeat the production that you're a part of.
So I'm a script consultant for PBS Masterpiece. Many of their adaptations. The two most notable ones are the series Sanditon, that just finished its third and final season in March, and Tom Jones, which is premiered on April 30th. I'm sorry, yes, April 30th. So those are the two current airing programs.
Okay, are those available on demand, or do we just have to check PBS listings?
You can watch them week by week on PBS, but if you have the PBS Passport on your app, you can binge all of it at one time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
The third season was wrapped in Sanderson.
John didn't quite hear you. You say third season of you say Sanderson?
Sanditon. It's an adaptation of Jane Austen's last novel, which was unfinished.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So it's got all the Jane Austen-esque stuff, but also, just some really great character stuff.
So then as script supervisor, you have to fill in some gaps being an unfinished
Right. Well, I'm a script consultant, so I'm mainly making sure that it is staying true to that era that Austen wrote in, making sure that things are historically accurate. And because this was the first time that Jane Austen introduced a Black character, it was to make sure, and it was unfinished, it was to make sure that the development of those storylines that got truncated because she died before she finished it, just to make sure it stays within the Jane Austen, it stays kind of accurate to what her aim is in a lot of her novels.
Okay, great. And then I also see we have someone up on Zoom that's just listed as some dude. Who is some dude?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, hello, sir. For those who don't know, this is our former fearless leader, Court Canick, who was our executive director and is now relocated down to California. How are you doing, sir? I have had so many people ask, how is Court doing? I'm like, I haven't talked to him in the longest time. I have no idea.
Yeah, I've been hiding out.
Well, I'm very glad to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for everything that you did for us. Greatly appreciated.
Hey, it's good to see everybody.
Art, it's good
I'm
to see
still a
you.
member.
Court, good to see you. This is Chuck Edson. We met last July at the Commons grounds or something, and really enjoyed talking to you then. Thank you. And that's why I'm here tonight.
Oh, great. Good to hear.
And looks like Steve Robinson also just joined us. Hello, Steve. Thank you for being here. Have you, Steve, have you joined Klamath Film meetings previously?
No, I have not.
Okay, great. How did you hear about us?
I saw an invite on a Jarrett Bryant page on Facebook.
Oh, fantastic. Are you based here in Klamath, or are you in Eugene, or where?
I'm actually in Southern California.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Jarrett should be joining us here in a few minutes. But when we start off these meetings, we'd like to just kind of for any sort of networking opportunities, give people a chance to talk about any sort of project they may be working on now, or just if there's a film you recently saw or TV show that you're really hyped about, you want to share as recommendations. Are you in the industry? Is there anything you can tell us in terms of what kind of work you've done?
So I'm kind of industry adjacent. I am a writer. I have several screenplays that are currently being shopped. I've written some plays before. I've known Mr. Bryant for many years and worked with him a little bit while he was down here in Southern California. So I saw this invite and I said, oh, I'd love to kind of be part of that. So that's kind of where I am right now. So industry adjacent, but not in the industry per se.
Okay. Well, welcome. And we'll go through full introductions for everybody. We like to kind of save that for when our guest is here so they can get a sense of who we are as well. But so if there is anything that you've been working on or anything you may need help with, any advice you're looking for in the film industry, or just something fun you recently watched you want to tell us about, by all means, you're welcome to, chime in.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I just did finish watching something that I thought was kind of fun on Netflix. It was called Sanctuary, dealing with kind of the sumo wrestling community in Japan. I thought it was kind of interesting, different approach to it. So if anyone has seen that, hopefully you were enthusiastic about it as I was. If you haven't, I would highly recommend it. Great character development, story development, and kind of an interesting twist.
Very nice. Thank you for the recommendation. I just finished binging the new Muppet series on Disney Plus, so all about Dr. Teeth and Electric Mayhem, which is, hits all the feels from a nostalgia side of things. Especially since I worked in the music industry for many years, and it's basically 10 episodes about the music industry and all the shady things that happen in the music industry. But if you grew up with the Muppets, and I think everyone here grew up with the Muppets, you have a certain love for Dr. Teeth and Electric Mayhem. So highly recommend if you enjoyed the first Muppets film. I think it's a little truer to that than the Muppets Most Wanted film in terms of style of it. So check that out. It's on Disney Plus if you get it. Also, for folks of animation, on Showtime right now, there's this amazing feature film go around. It did not win, but there's a film called Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And especially Lori and Nina, since you two are into stop motion animation and puppetry, this is a film about a filmmaker who moves into an Airbnb, and there are sentient shells that he befriends that are living in this house. And it seems like a very simplistic film, but the stop motion animation that's done, and there is some CG in it that's done as well, but you really can't tell. It looks like it's all stop motion that's interacting with people in real time. And technical standpoint, to make something like that look so simple is really extraordinarily difficult, but it's charming, it's heartfelt, it's funny. It's incredible. I've watched it multiple times. I absolutely love it. So if you're a fan of stop motion animation and you like films that are family friendly, will give you the feels, but will also make you laugh, check out Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Anyone else have projects they've been working on, or also we try to make these meetings networking opportunities. So if you're in need of something, feel free to chime in. I can tell you I'm a filmmaker based here in Klamath Falls. I'm a commercial drone pilot for both aerial and underwater. I also do a lot of radio work if you need voiceover. And I'm board chair for Klamath Film. So if any of our services are available, please don't, or if any of our services are of need, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know everybody's got food over here in their mouths. Cord, how are your various projects that you've always had in various stages of completion going now that you got more free time?
Yeah, things are good. Have you talked to Chris Anderson lately?
I have not talked to Chris, no.
Well, Chris and I are working on a screenplay.
Oh, okay.
Right now, it's an adaptation of there's a World War I story written by this British officer, Edie Swinton. It's called The Point of View, and we're adapting that for a short film.
Chris's term on our board ended in December. So while he's still a member, he's not on the board at least for a year.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just doing that with him. I have an astronomy book coming out next year.
Okay.
And kind of started shooting again just to I had a lot of time on my hands.
Right.
So I started shooting again, and so I'm kind of out of the black magic world, but I'm shooting Sony these days.
Okay.
And exploring the technical of what you can do. It's really nice cameras.
Well, we can update you, Cord, on exciting news, and that is that we are actively working on multiple feature films to be shot here in Klamath in the next coming months.
Yeah, I read a little bit. I try and keep track on the site when I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew you had some stuff coming to town.
Oh, Anthony wants to know what kind of camera that is in the background.
That's an FS 700.
FS 700.
It's 4K, but it can do 16-bit RAW, which was the big attraction for me.
Okay. Price tag on that, or just you want to say a lot?
Well, I got it used.
Okay.
But new they were about 10 and a half.
Okay.
But it's fun to have something I could shoot something serious with.
Right. So for I know Sharon, you're probably on the picket line, and Steve, you probably have friends on the picket line right now. Do we have any updates as far as the WGA, the Guild of America that's currently on strike?
Well, I teach film and literature at Cal State Northridge. So
Oh, okay.
I have not yet been to the picket line because our semester, just ended. So in the next couple of weeks, well, hopefully it won't last that long, but I think it will. So I won't be able to go for another week or so until I'm done grading and all that stuff. But I mean, the turnout has been great. They've shut a lot of productions down. From what I hear, people try to come in through something called the neutral gate. And so people have found out about that and are picketing at the neutral gate. So it's been successful. And I think the most important thing is that most of the other major unions have expressed solidarity, because SAG also has their negotiations and their members just authorized a strike vote if it comes to that. And so their negotiation deadline, I think, is the beginning of June. And I forgot when DGA is, but even other unions, IATSE, all the IATSE unions and other unions, all of them are in solidarity with us. So that's a good sign. And just, yeah, I think this is gonna be important, and I think more people will strike, because the studios, what they are refusing to budge on is ridiculous. So, yeah, I think, people doing things independently, keep doing it because there's not going to be a lot of activity elsewhere. So,
Sharon, Anthony was asking what the cause of the strike is. I don't know all of the set details and all of the complaints, but I know it's fair wages, residuals, things like healthcare. I think is a part of it as well. But please correct me if I'm wrong.
Those, yes, it's fair, and the fair wages thing is, I think, the most glaring when we see the profits that studios have made, yet they don't want to increase wages. They want to decrease wages, actually. And by structuring, particularly television, in a certain way, they get away with not employing writing staffs. And so very top heavy. There's no way for writers to advance. And the other big sticking point is artificial intelligence, because that gets into infringing on people's, copyrights. If you can duplicate an actor's likeness, you don't need the actor, but you can proceed as if the actor is in a production, right? Same thing with writing. They think that, we'll just get AI to write scripts.
Right.
Yeah. My students try to get over with that. And though I said, you know what, guys, you can write better than this. Please do not rely on this. Number one, because you'll get reported for plagiarism. And number two, because come on, this is horrible. So
that's actually something I was going to try to do with the film camp that we teach every summer, was every morning punch in some keywords and have Chat GPT write a script that we then try to create that day in the film camp each day, and see kind of how it goes. I know there's been some projects where a few years back, people would feed, like there was one sci-fi project that's on YouTube. I think it's called Summer Spring or something like that, where they fed every sci-fi script they could think of into an AI bot that spit out a script, and then they tried to recreate it as a film, which it had some pretty hilarious results for it. But it seems like it's getting better. So I appreciate that WGA is taking this fight now in terms of AI, because as it continues to progress, this will be a legitimate issue in the near future in terms of, can humans be replaced by this technology as it gets better and better? And still,
the future is here. I would ask everybody to look for Justine Bateman's Twitter thread. She has a degree in computer science and has worked in the field, and she lays out, at least for the actors, for SAG people, what this issue really means, and what studios are doing now, and all that they project they'll be able to do in the future. And she says studios have to be reined in with how they use AI. And that was one of the things that they didn't even come back with a counter position on. They just ignored. There's a graphic also floating around social media with what the Writers Guild asked for and what the studio's response was. And some of it is just smack worthy. It's like, excuse me? Like, just no response or some BS response? Yeah, no, they have to be reined in. And it's unfortunate that it's gotten this far. You know, they should have been reined in 10, 15 years ago when Jarrett and I were screaming about things, when we were heading up the Committee of Black Writers. But, you know, since it didn't affect everybody, nobody cared. And now, look, okay, so, well, here you go. So, yeah, it's, you know, I think the default is always blaming the people complaining, like somehow, oh, you're just afraid of technology, or like, you know what? NO on that. No, I'm not afraid of technology. It's that I do know technology, and we've all seen the you know, Octavia Butler, if anything, told us 40 years ago what would happen. So yeah, it's nothing to kind of shrug and say, oh, but you know, it's really good, it's innocent. Yeah, it could be in the right hands, but we already know. Mm-hmm. So we gotta nip it in the bud now.
Well, thank you so much has joined us tonight. Hello, Jarrett. Good to see you, sir.
How are you, Kurt? Well, how are you?
We're doing great, and a few of your friends joined in too. And just a minute ago, we had Steve Robinson on here, but he ducked out right before you joined on. So maybe he'll come back. But so we always hold off introductions until our guest is here, so you can get kind of a sense of who we are. But I do first want to follow briefly with what Sharon said. I believe it was Cal State Northridge that you said that you teach at, correct?
Yes.
So we helped out Cal State Northridge students in 2021 for a short film that they shot up here. And so Klamath Film was heavily involved with, I know I'm going to blank on all of the students' names, but the director was Michael O'Leary. And a whole collective of Northridge students came up here to Klamath to shoot a film called This Is Their Land. And we helped with location scouting and equipment and permits and everything that we possibly could. And that film actually world premiered at our film festival last year in 2022. Got a standing ovation from our audience. We had, it was all about the Modoc Wars of the 1870s. And they shot that at in the Tule Lake area, in and around the lava beds area where all that conflict actually took place. Which was a wonderful project. And we did go through all of the COVID hoops on that production. We got lots of participation from the local tribes, and we had a large contingent of them out for the screening. We even did a really wonderful panel with the filmmakers, as well as some tribal members that is available on YouTube to watch, about an hour-long talk about the filmmaking process, working with tribes, current relationships with tribes, how those of us who are not Indigenous can be, you know, better allies and neighbors in the process. It was a really wonderful conversation from last year. So I'm not sure if you remember them as your students or not, but that was a really fun project that we actively got to be a part of.
Excellent. No, I don't remember. That might have been in the cinema television department, but just bravo. I love to hear it. I love to hear it.
Who was the producer of This Is Their Land?
Sharon, thanks for joining. Same with
Hey,
you.
Jarrett.
Hey.
Jared.
Hey, Josh.
So with Jarrett here, let's do our introduction so that our guests can get a little better sense of who we all are as an organization. Of course, Jarrett is already familiar with us because his last film, Maxie, was in our 2021 film festival, and he won the award for Best Feature Film at our film festival. As I've told him before, I do have a bone to pick with him about that, though, because I grew up in Eugene. And I recognized about 99.9% of the places where you filmed Maxie. And the subject matter wasn't painting my hometown in the best of light, dude.
Yeah, I've heard that many times.
So first of all, I'm Kurt Lidke. I am the board chair of Klamath Film. We are a nonprofit 501c3 based here in Klamath Falls, Oregon. We serve as the film liaison office for Klamath County. So any film productions coming through, we help out with location scouting and cast and crew calls and permits and costuming and anything else that we can possibly do to help entice film productions to come to our area. We organize the annual Klamath Independent Film Festival, which is the only film fest around that exclusively shows made in Oregon films. And we put on an annual film camp as well as screenings throughout the year and meetings like this that are intended as a networking opportunity and a learning experience from experts in the industry. So Anthony, why don't you introduce yourself? Oh, sorry. Actually, who I am beyond board chair. I'm a filmmaker. I'm videographer at Klamath Community College is my day job. And I'm also a commercial drone pilot for both aerial and underwater.
Anthony Lee Thornton, and I'm focused on creating investigative documentaries here in the Southern Oregon and Eastern Oregon area.
Wonderful. And John, do you want to grab a mic and...
Yeah, John Skadstad, just a film member here for a while, and once I get all these things done in real life that I can have time to do something, then I will. And I'm hoping to do a cyberpunk themed film, which hopefully will be interesting.
That'll be amazing.
And then our guests down at the end, if you could introduce yourselves, please. Yeah, into that mic.
Okay. Hi, I'm Melanie. I am fairly new to Klamath. I'm just an artist who loves film.
And I'm Aaron Wood, otherwise known as Arlo. I'm a local musician and songwriter, and I also enjoy film and like to be part of the film festival.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming out to some of our events previously. We appreciate that. Chuck?
I'm Chuck Edson. I'm on the board for the Film Society as the overaged, outdated social activist in the group. So, and sort of a community representative here, and Court is responsible for bringing me in. I met him last summer, and I'm very pleased to see you looking so well, Court. I have to say, it warms me up. Thank you. Actually, I've also been, Anthony in here and I have been talking about trying to produce something about homeless people and their views about how their lives could be improved if they wanted to.
Yeah, Court, you're more distant now, but not forgotten around here. So, Court, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Okay, I'm Court Kannick. I used to be super involved on the board and did a little execing. Now I'm not. Took 6 months off and just kind of chilled. Now I'm working on a film with Chris Anderson, who's also a former board member. That's an adaptation of a military short story from World War I. And doing a lot of experimenting with technical cinematography, and because that was kind of where I got my start in it. That's pretty much the whole deal. Right now, I'm actually chatting from a hotel room. I'm in North Dakota, and I will be back in Southern California in about a week and a half. And that's about it. Hey, Jared. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Great to see you again, Court. Thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate hearing from you. Lori, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lori. Jarrett, I met you at KIF when you showed up. I was one of the volunteers, as well as watching a lot of the films. But yeah, I've been a Klamath Film member for probably over 5 years by now, and really enjoy watching films. And in the last couple of years, started making some stop motion, and had the puzzle as well as squirrely puzzling was at KIF last year. And I finished Squirrely Showdown, which I submitted to KIF this year, so we'll see if it gets in. But it's an animated or stop motion with squirrels and jigsaw puzzles. So not the usual pairing, but it's a unique story, and hope people enjoy it. Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to Sharon. Really enjoy Masterpiece, and really thought the adaptation of Sanditon was just delightful and amazing. So thank you for your efforts on that. You were mentioning that earlier.
Thank you, Lori, for being here. Bowen, you just pulled in. We're just going through introductions. So why don't you quickly introduce yourself, sir?
Yep, with the chord length I'm offered. So my name is Bowen Browder. I am an actor locally based in the Klamath Falls area. For my day job, I work over at Oregon Tech, but generally just have a love of storytelling, have a love of performance, have a love of the creative drive behind any type of cinema or storytelling in general, but really do have a love for the medium of film and all that it can do and all that it offers. So happy to be here.
Terrific. And Sharon, we've already heard a bit from you, but why don't you formally introduce yourself?
Good evening. I'm Sharon Johnson. I am a friend of Jarrett's from the Writers Guild of America West. And I teach African-American literature and African-American film at Cal State Northridge, and also am a script consultant on PBS Masterpiece. And just wonderful to get to see Jarrett's face and hear from him and hear from this wonderful organization and all the things that you do.
Thank you so much for being here. Josh, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Josh Schwartz, and I'm a jazz drummer and composer in love films and filmmaking. Would love to work with Jarrett again.
And Nina.
Hi, I'm Nina Oberlin. I'm a production designer, animator, set builder, kind of do a lot of different things, especially when it comes to stop motion animation, puppet builder, and currently I'm just getting ready to leave to go to Rome. I'm going to be gone for a few weeks, getting started on my residency for my PhD for visual arts. It's kind of a little bit about me.
Wonderful. So Jarrett, there is all of us. Now, you're already familiar with our organization, having been at our film festival previously, but let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the film industry.
Wow. If I can remember. It's been a few decades. I initially started as a playwright. I started writing little plays in Hollywood. There's this little area that's called Santa Monica Boulevard Theater Row, and I would, we produced 4 plays there, and had some pretty good attendance, and it was the plays ended up doing pretty well, and people really liked them. And I thought to myself, hey, maybe this is a direction I need to continue to go in. But then I realized that playwrights really don't make any money. Unless you're August Wilson or something. And he really didn't make much until after, he passed away in terms of his family. Anyway, from there, I wrote a spec script for a show called Homicide. I don't know if you remember Homicide, the show. And I kind of circulated around to a few friends, and they passed it on to a few producers who read it and thought, hey, this is really good. And then I wrote another one for Ally McBeal, and that too was well received. And I got a job working for Universal on the set of New York Undercover. Well, they filmed it in New York, but the writing took place at Universal with Dick Wolf. So I did that for 2 years. And then I worked on a show called G versus E, which was like a supernatural cop show.
Oh man, I love G versus E.
Yeah. I did the Retribution episode. And it was a great experience, had fun there, but the show didn't last. And then shortly thereafter, Sharon and I, during that time at the Guild, we were, fighting for representation, especially of course, writers of color, and which was an uphill battle. It's great to see today with all the content and the content that's needed out there. A lot of people of color are getting opportunities that certainly didn't get opportunities when we were at the Guild fighting for that back in the late 90s. or mid 90s, I think it was. And then from there, there was a writer's strike, and the, you know, the world of reality TV took over, and shows like Survivor, The Apprentice, and others. There's a show in New Jersey too. I forgot the New Jersey show that was a big deal.
Yeah, Jersey Shore.
Jersey Shore, yes. That took over, and writers were kicked off of lots, and there weren't any jobs, and we were all struggling and trying to make it. And that's when I decided to leave the world of writing into the corporate world, and we had, my wife and I had a couple kids at that time, and they were small, they were young, but you know, diapers cost money, so I had to find a job in the corporate world and started doing that and traveling for business, and I had a wonderful time. It was a great experience, and we moved to Oregon. We moved up to Eugene during that period. That was 17 years ago. And I kind of pulled back on the writing because it basically wasn't making me any money. So until, I would say, the kids were about 12 and 9, and I started getting back into it. I started back, you know, kind of sowing my oats again. And by the time they were 20 and 17, they really had nothing to do with me. So I started writing a television show. At first, I was like 3 episodes in, and I thought to myself, okay, am I going to do what I normally do? Is, you know, you write it, you have people read it, they critique it and what have you, and then you send it into a manager or an agent, and you have them read it, and you cross your fingers and you hope that they respond to it. Or the other choice was, since digital is so much cheaper now than film, right? And it's really easy to produce your own movie. I thought to myself, well, if I write a low budget film and shoot it myself and get some actors and local actors and what have you, I can actually tick an item off my bucket list, and that is to produce a film. And that's when Maxi came about, and I started working on that, and I wrote it. We did some readings of the screenplay, and then I rewrote it, and we did some more readings, and then we cast the film, and I got a cinematographer, Henry Huntington, and other players, of course, the cast, and we started shooting it in February of 2020. And shortly thereafter, we shot for 2 weekends. It was weekends only, shot for 2 weekends, and then COVID happened early March. So then I had to go back to the drawing board and rewrite it again. And we were down for 3 weeks, and I had to incorporate COVID into the storyline, and which I think actually helped. And then we finished June 22nd of 2020. So about 6 months. It was supposed to be a 3-month ordeal, maybe 4, but ended 6 months. And then after that, post production and sound, audio, and audio is just the absolute worst. But so work our way through that. And then the film was released in terms of the festival circuit early 2021, and Klamath Film Festival, like I've said to you before, Kurt, was by far our best experience in terms of just overall the event, the festivities, the networking, the theater. I love the theater. The Ross Raglan's a great theater, and everyone was really receptive. And then we released the film to the public in 2022, April 29th of 2022. And we were just supposed to run for 1 week, but we ended up running for 4 weeks because they really enjoyed it and people responded to the material. And there you go. That's how it happened. And we won the Klamath Southern, I guess, a Southern Region Film Festival, which was nice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jarrett, for joining us, and it's wonderful to see you again. He did not mention, but I did say earlier, his film actually won our award for Best Feature Film at our festival. So he got one of our specially wooden carved trophies that is unique to our festival.
Yes, and it's on my shelf back there somewhere.
So, Jarrett, are you a WGA member? So are you currently on strike at the moment?
Well, I definitely support the writers and the WGA, and I would not work for a signatory at this time. But I was emeritus status for the WGA because I haven't had a job in over 17 years.
Okay.
With the signatory. So that's where I stand. Of course, I support the guild, and just like Sharon, I'm sure she supports the guild. And we will always fight for what's right for the writers because they often get neglected.
Yeah, you did bring up an interesting point that the last time WGA went on strike, the industry's shift was creating a whole bunch of reality TV shows that didn't require writers, and now we have such a glut of reality TV as a consequence of that. If you enjoy it, great, but it is what it is. Yeah, so I'm curious, since Sharon and Jarrett, this is both your background, what you think the consequence of the current strike might be in terms of what the industry's shift might be if they want to dig in for the long haul on this after doing reality TV last year that didn't require many writers, what they might do this time.
Sharon, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Everything is written. I think people think writing is like scratching a pencil across a piece of paper. If you're standing on the set and you say, no, change this line to whatever, you've just written, even though you're not typing something or putting something on paper. So the concept of what what constitutes writing, frankly, that's how people get away with stepping on writers, right? Somebody mentioned theater at the top of the meeting, and theater, the writer is king or queen. You don't touch those words. And I think as far as film is concerned, Denzel Washington, like he's my friend, Denzel Washington, in adapting August Wilson, and you mentioned August Wilson, Jarrett, Denzel said, no, I'm not changing August Wilson's words. That is not my gift. And so that's probably one of the only adaptation situations where a director will actually say, oh no, I am not changing the writer's words. And so this whole concept of, writing is just throwing some letters on a piece of paper or throwing some letters on a computer screen is ridiculous. And the way writers will, I guess, make people realize that is to stop and not acquiesce. And all the reality shows prove that, yes, obviously, when you don't have a staff of committed writers, you get, some stuff, whatever, on the screen. And it's unfortunate that, people watch it and give it credence, give it value. But that doesn't mean that we should just kind of fold, really. I said earlier, I think this is going to be a long haul, particularly, or maybe not, particularly because we know SAG is in agreement. And from what I hear, DGA is more in agreement than not. They can be sometimey. But all the other unions are in agreement. So I think if we stay in unison and stay united, we can make some change, but we can't let them kind of sweet talk us. That's my take.
I agree. I think that when it comes to writing, what I found speaking to people about the craft, especially those who are on the outside of Hollywood, they're unfamiliar with what goes into a screenplay or a teleplay. the time and the effort, because most of the shows, or let's say a film, let's look at a film. Let's look at, old school, let's go Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, I heard took 10 years to make it to the screen. However, it was probably written and rewritten several times by a writer 15 years prior to that. They toiled over their computer or their keyboard, and they created these wonderful characters that we recognize today and are standards in American cinema. They created this on their own, alone, no directors, no producers, no actors. It was just their creation. And people tend to think that the actors just show up on set and speak. And that the director just, automatically just goes, hey, move to the left, move to the right, shout, and that's it. And that's all it took. And no, there is this manuscript that's about 120 pages long when you think of something like Forrest Gump, which could be even longer than that. But anywhere from 90 to 120 pages that was created by a writer or a team of writers. Even when it comes to television, it's a collaborative effort. There's a lot of people in that room giving their thoughts and opinions before it even sees the light of day. So when you look at the strike and you think of these studios who devalue writers, but it's the shows that were created by writers that are making them all of this money, right? They are making a ton of money based on the creative nature of whoever that was that wrote the screenplay for it or wrote the teleplay for it or what have you. And we lose sight of that because it seems so easy, but it isn't. It's a craft, and it's a craft that takes years, decades to master, and you never really fully master it. Every film has a flaw or several flaws, whether independent or produced by a major studio. But someone had to write the screenplay for it, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to pay the people that create the vehicles by which you make millions and or billions.
And then on top of that, the phrase that I often hear is that a script is not law, it's a guide. Because oftentimes on set, actors may be like, well, let me try this. Or a director may say, that was good, but let's maybe try this all of a sudden, see if that works. Oftentimes at the beginning of films, you can see something that says like adapted from a book by so-and-so. And well, it may be adapted from where it's maybe taking the guideline of the book, but then the film goes off in a whole other different direction. For the people who say, oh, you got to read the book if you saw the movie, you realize it's basically two different stories that loosely connected, but one may go off in a very different direction than what was originally written.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, adaptations, it's very difficult to adapt a book, like for instance, the Harry Potter books. Right. They go into so much detail about the world, right? But you can't do that on film, right? You've got to show it. And it's brevity, move the story along, move it ahead. You can't spend 20 minutes talking about Hogwarts.
A great example is Lord of the Rings in terms of a director trying to stay true to the books. And as a result, the films are like 4 hours long for the director's cut. And still they had to cut stuff out from the storyline in order to make it work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, how dare you take Tom Bombadil out of Lord of the Rings? Well, the film's already 4 hours long. We can't keep every page of this massive book that's that thick.
Right, exactly. And that decision is usually made by the writer. And then as time goes on, of course, the producer and the director, they have their 2 cents. But primarily that writer has to read that novel and pull out pieces that he or she feels best suit a screenplay, right? Not a novel, but a screenplay.
Bowen, you want to say
I
something?
think it really lends itself, especially from films that are adapted from books or other like written text storytelling. Books in general, they're much more accessible as like a long form narrative structure, or at least a long form consumption structure where you can really languish with it and you can like stop reading or start reading at any time. As for a movie, you have like, it's expected that you have that one time block to sit there and watch it. So there's a lot of details that you have to compress and parse down and see how much can you scene into a single shot even, and really see how much storytelling from the books can I fit onto that square of the frame, and how much can you do it consistently so that the narrative is still maintained, and that there are going to be some sacrifices just because the conversion is never perfect, but seeing how best you can stay true to what the message and real, like the mouthfeel of what the story is like in the book, and how that can be adapted to the screen.
Yeah. And I think Sharon, I think she would agree with this, is that especially when you're a new writer, a young writer, it's much harder for you to determine what is important and what isn't. What is, film worthy and what isn't. A lot of times young writers feel as though they've got to, everything's important. and that's not the case.
So does anyone have questions for Jarrett that they want to bring up? Chuck, yes.
How you doing, Chuck?
Kind of a bummer question, but AI, and it's coming, and we know that, and it's getting better and better faster than we can imagine. I'm afraid. What is going to be the accommodation, or how is? I mean, this is a question that completely baffles me. How do we accommodate it? How do we live with it, or what? And I think your guys' perspective may be keener than most, given that you're going through it now. I'm not sure what the question was, but thank you.
Well, okay, kind of what is the future of writing with the reality that AI may be unstoppable as been implementation into the industry?
Yeah, make a great movie about it or something. I don't know.
I think what concerns me the most about it is, okay, for example, I think it was the last Star Wars movie where they had AI for a character who had passed away, and they used, computer graphics to make him, he looks real. He looked real, but
right.
There were things about him. He was pixelated at times. Right. And you thought, okay, I can live with this, but I still want the real actor. I still want emotion and facial expressions. I still want this. I want to feel as though this person's alive. Right. When it comes to writing, since you're not seeing it visually, right, you're just hearing it. I think that the emotional aspect of the character, in terms of the dialogue, in terms of what or how it is conveyed, right? And it's, each writer has his or her own voice, and that voice comes across in their own authentic way. So if you take a computer and you try to give it a voice, it doesn't have a soul. So I could see it in terms of maybe being very formulaic, like they want to just do like kids shows, right? Very formulaic, no surprises, basic. That may work. But when it comes to adult themed film and or television, I think they're going to have a much harder time giving it a heart. What is it? Alice in Wonderland? No, it's All the Yellow Brick Road with who wanted to have the heart? Was it the Tin Man who wanted to have a heart?
The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
There will need a heart, and finding that heartbeat, I don't know how a computer could do that.
So what Jarrett was referencing there was Star Wars Rogue One. The actor Peter Cushing, who played Grand Moff Tarkin, was dead for about 30 years. And they found an actor that had similar facial features, And he played a prominent role in the film where they CG'd in Peter Cushing's face over this actor for every single scene shot that he was in, frame by frame. They did the same thing with Carrie Fisher, the end of the film, to make Carrie Fisher look very young. And then when Carrie Fisher died in production of the episode 9 film, they also did some CG on that. And coming out this, they also did Robert De Niro. They made him look significantly younger for The Irishman. And this summer, there's a new Indiana Jones film coming out where Harrison Ford, they're shaving about 40 years off of Harrison's face.
They're shaving the years off the face, but they can't shave off the age how he looks when he runs. He's
Right.
that he can't run, but yeah. But I've had a lot of these discussions myself with a lot of other people over at Oregon Tech, because of course full of techie nerds, and they like to talk about it, especially in like Mark Newport's film class. I like to talk with some of the students in those classes.
Right.
I've definitely been pondering the implementation of AI, or at least the most up and coming and most prominent, most like well-known AIs that are coming out right now. And I really think just by the nature of the tools and how quickly they develop, that there will be a point where like it is so easy for people to generate content across the board that it will really flood the pool of like available pieces of media to like take part in or to consume or just to watch or listen to or whatever. Along with that though, I kind of imagine it how the best, I had a really good discussion with this like even last night with someone, and the consensus, or at least the idea that I thought really where AI may potentially go, and I can't predict the future, but it's almost like very much as you were saying, Jarrett, in regards to AIs or that robotic production, it lacks a voice. I view it as much the difference between if you got like a table or furniture piece from like local like woodcrafter or woodcarver and like making something handmade. It's that difference between mass production to just the machine process where it's precise, it gets everything right, but you don't see that authenticity. You don't see the direct like one-to-one fidelity of the handiwork that was and the craftsmanship that was put into that art piece. So it will come down to different where I think that AI is carving itself a niche that is going to stay for at least the foreseeable future, in regards that it will have uses both separately and in collaboration with other filmmakers and other artists of all stripes. But there will definitely be spaces where if people are looking for like a cheap, accessible experience that's just on demand, they can go to AI. But if they want something authentic, if they want something the real deal, if they want something that can really give as one-to-one of the human experience as possible, they're still going to look for the spaces where people are really making films themselves.
That human experience, I also think, and people wanting to have that human experience is the reason why we're seeing such a resurgence in the sale of vinyl albums all of a sudden, and vinyl collecting, of analog sound versus digital. Digital may be easily accessible if you're a Spotify or Pandora user or whatever, but that authentic experience that has all of the clicks and the pops in vinyl gives a more authentic human experience, and why so many people, particularly young people, surprisingly, are really starting to clamor for vinyl records right now.
It's becoming a bit of a counterculture.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it definitely has a counterculture vibe to it.
Kurt, I just wanted to say, we're not going to stop this. I mean, there's always going to be people who push the envelope in every direction. And even with our reality TV versus written, reality TV obviously has its space, but I think, but not everything is that, I mean, if every show on TV was reality TV, I don't watch them hardly anymore. It's like a lot of things, they're fads, they're trends, but it's like you always go back to the classics eventually in some ways. And so it's like people are finding, like you say, they're going back to analog, or they're going back to this or that, because they're noticing there's something missing. I also noticed it's like on like video games back in the 80s and stuff, everybody had to write their own graphics engine and everything for their games. And so they all look different.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we had 3D cards that we could put in the computer, now everything looked the same. And I remember I was just like, I don't know if I like this direction. It's cookie cutter. But with the AI stuff, it's like, look, they're always going to push that. But I think everybody, like, I could tell Peter Cushing was wrong. I could tell Carrie Fisher was wrong. It's like, I think there's a place for that when they're trying to fill in. But, if, for example, you know, you got all those AI robots from Japan and everything else. What if we just had a show with just them in it, with a script made by AI? I mean, how many people are going to watch this thing, and for how long before they're like, done, you know? So I think with people that can kind of see through it, they know where it belongs and where it don't. And hopefully that will continue.
I don't know
Aaron had a question or a comment.
Yeah, I was just kind of gonna ask the professional writers if they see AI as an opportunity to actually cause some inspiration. I know I've dabbled a little bit with the art AI, and I'm a songwriter, and I've kind of thought about, what if I put in some ideas for a song, see what it comes back, and then I'm gonna take what it gives me and say, well, you know, this is a good start. And then work it from there into something more human, more, you know, from my voice. But what does that bring to mind?
Jarrett?
Well, you know, I already have enough ideas in my head. I don't need to ask a machine, gee, what do I do here? So yeah, no, you know, I'm an introvert, so I sit with myself a lot. Yeah, I don't need a machine to do that. So, or I don't need some artificial intelligence and program to do that. So no, I don't do that. I mean, maybe some writers do, but you know, maybe it was my parents. You know, I always value my own self and my own capabilities above any other person or any other entity. So yeah, I wouldn't use AI as inspiration.
I agree with you. It would probably be used more as a resource, right? If you could find a way to, like, if you had a scenario that you were creating and you knew nothing about, crime or a certain type of crime or a certain way people think or something based on psychology or something, and you just wanted to know a little more information about it, it could be used for that. But I think when you sit down in front of that monitor, in front of that keyboard, it's got to be you. It's got to be authentic. If it's not, it'll feel forced. And usually when that happens, you end up with a material that you're not very pleased with. You can't stand behind it.
Let me throw one other curveball in here, and that is that there are some scientists and theorists or philosophers or whatever, speculators, who are talking about the next logical evolutionary step is some kind of merger between AI and living matter. This is going to be after I'm not around. I don't think I hope I don't have to experience that, but never mind. I'm not sure if that was a conversation killer or what, but thank you.
Well, one quick thing that I want to add on to that the musicians in the room and online will find particularly interesting. Maybe you heard about it, but last year, there was an AI generated rapper. Someone had created an algorithm that created AI-based hip hop music that was suddenly becoming really popular on TikTok and Instagram, to the point where Capitol Records signed it to a major label record deal as the first AI generated rapper. And they were going to record an album, put it out, huge press with this. And it got so much backlash to it that they ended up canceling the contract and apologizing to the entire industry and musical world as a whole. But that's also a reality. As someone who worked in the music industry for many years in Hollywood, I worked at Capitol Records and Interscope and Universal and MySpace and on and on. That's also a thought, is that it's not just writers here, but potentially musicians could also be replaced in the future by this just as easily. And what happens when
artists as well?
Yeah. I mean, if we think about what art is, the way I define art is that it's a reflection of the human experience. Right. Be it dance, sculpture, painting, music, acting, writing, in whatever form, art is a reflection of the human experience. So is it art when we're no longer having that human element create the human experience?
For example, Josh.
Oh,
who-
hang on a second. Melanie had a comment. Get a little bit closer to the mic.
So much stuff, so much that I would fall for every time, but what it cannot do is give me the sticky. The sticky is what art is. It's
Mhm.
sticky and it's gooey and it's gross. That is what.
I like that descriptor.
I'm sorry, Jarrett, you had a comment to follow up on that.
I was saying, Josh, who's a musician, I gave him a screener of Maxi early on, in the post-production stage. And I just had him watch it and just see if he could, compose some music, a score, for certain areas of the film. And he watched the film. I think we had a conversation. He watched it like 10 or 12 times, right? To really get the feel for the scene, the emotional impact, what he was feeling, and then to translate that to music. That would never happen with AI, right? You would never get a computer that would sit down and really digest the material over and over, continue so they feel that they've got it right, that the emotional stage or the emotional moments that were needed in order to move the film forward were touched upon. And that's where someone like Josh, a human being, right, will be able to accomplish this as opposed to a machine. Josh, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like that acknowledgement. That was nice. Thanks, Jared.
Well, I think when you look at music and everything else, I mean, it's like you got writer's block, you got music block. I can see like even in in programs that you got for musical applications, sometimes there's like random button. In a way, random button is kind of like AI. It's giving you suggestions. It's giving you a different patch. It's giving you something. I mean, in some ways, we kind of use the technology, but it's like you say, it's got to be a tool. And if the world becomes where the AI starts making an AI entity start making money, then we'll be replaced. Then it'll be the AIs going to the movies. We'll be excluded, to the point where we're the obsolete software. And so, I mean, is it really going to get to that point, like Terminator, the Borg, and everything else? I mean,
What might be is simply drawing initial inspiration and then a human taking it from there to give it that humanizing element. I was watching an interview recently with Damon Albarn, the musician behind Blur and Gorillaz and all that, and he was talking about how he wrote Gorillaz' biggest hit song, Clint Eastwood, that has this really identifiable beat, and he bought a cheap little like Casio keyboard for like $10, and that beat was built in as the first like built-in thing. So all he did was press a button, and then he built the entire song around that already established beat that was part of the keyboard.
That's the big thing that I think.
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Bowen.
That's the big thing that I think that a lot of people like we're all like with the explosion of like sci-fi and future-oriented media. All of us are like, we hear AI in the news or in headline, or we read it in headlines, and then everyone's all like running away with this idea of like Skynet or the Borg or whatever. But really, that is the big clarification I think should happen in the coming years, or at least that collectively people understand, is that AIs ultimately should function more as tools. They are tools. They are
supplemental.
Yes, exactly. They're supplemental to the artistic process.
like Avatar.
And well, they are another tool in the toolbox for artists or just other professionals where it can be utilized. It's just a more complex tool of a magnitude than we've previously experienced.
I just need to weigh in on that, because this is one of the things that this is Sharon. This is one of the things that the studios are trying to slip by. They want to create scripts by AI and then hire writers just to fix it up. And so no. We can't allow them to use it as a tool, because again, that is infringing on that's allowing them to make billions and drive writers further and further into not being able to survive. People think Hollywood and that everybody's rich. Most of the writers who are members of the guilds are just, bread and butter, day to day, everybody, trying, this is their, 9 to 5, so to speak. And considering the amount of hours that it takes, it's usually less than what minimum wage is. So for us to allow this whole narrative of, oh, AI is just a tool. No, because what the studios are trying to do is use AI to create the script and then just hire writers to fix. And that's no.
You as someone who
for full pay,
right,
and full, you know, commissions, or, you know, after the movie. I mean, if you still got what you wanted pay wise, would you allow it or not? I'm just curious.
No, because it doesn't add up to what we're getting pay wise. It's a rollback of the minimum basic.
If they would pay you what you wanted to be paid.
But no, what I want to be paid is minimum basic agreement. What I want to be paid is minimum basic agreement, and they're rolling that back.
Yeah, they would never standard rates if you're just coming in to doctor a script. That will be reduced. Your pay would be reduced quite significantly. Because there's no, why have it? Why, if you're going to pay me the same as if I wrote the entire script, as opposed to just doctoring the script, then why deal with AI? Why have, you know?
No, you're right. I mean, it's just in the end, I guess you're right. I guess I would strike too.
The one thing that I think can be comparable is on the music side. You know, Pro Tools emerged in the mid to late 90s, and this thing called Auto-Tune came into recording studios, and everyone thought, well, you're digitizing and falsifying music, and now it's like status quo that Pro Tools is used on everyone's voice to, you know, balance out and make sure they're in key. Nina had a really interesting comment in the chat. Nina, you want to chime in with that comment, or just leave it in the chat room?
I just wanted to say that, you know, writing is a major skill. I mean, it takes so much to create characters, to come up with the world. I mean, it's amazing how someone can create things that we so have fallen in love with. I mean, when you look at all the books like Lord of the Rings and any of the Jane Austen books, everything that you see in those, it took someone who had an imagination that was beyond what anyone else could see and, you know, and can formulate. So that is a gift and it's a major skill. And I would hate to see that go away. I mean, I've been working with a writer for 3 years. He's been working on putting a script together, and just to see how it's developed over time, how each time he sends a different draft, it's so much more amazing than the one before. So it's just cool to see that skill, and AI kind of takes away from it, unfortunately.
Well, that is the big thing.
Huh?
That is the big thing about AI, is that ultimately it isn't self-prompted, that it always has to build off of someone else's idea, however base that conceptualization is. And I don't know in the future if it's going to turn into a situation where we should either, like, it's a one or the other, where I would want to imagine that at some point there would be a middle ground of implementation of AI in storytelling or entertainment or art. But if it's to the point where it's so advanced, or if it's it crowds out human artists to the point where it's not feasible for people to make a living from their art, then that's a dire situation. And that's where comes down to the unfortunate reality of course, that's where writers are being put in this situation where they have to strike and they have to collectively make demands to corporate overlords who are just trying to make the best bottom line as possible and move forward with it, just at the sacrifice of any sort of artistic integrity.
Maybe y'all need to get together and make your own studio.
So well, this is a really interesting topic, and I'm sure we could spend hours talking about it, but I want to make sure that we don't disregard our guest and get back on track. So Lori put a fantastic question in the chat, which gets us back on track a little bit. Thank you, Lori, for that. So the question is, Jarrett, wondering if you can expand on your comment about young writers trying to include too much and not knowing what to remove or keep. What advice would you give a young writer around this? Or is this just learned by a writer through having more experiences? And thank you again, Lori, because we could have gotten stuck on that AI train for hours.
Well, Lori, I think quite a bit of it, of course, comes through experience. But when you're, there's the saying in writing, especially screenplays, it's show, don't tell. And the biggest thing when you're sitting there and you're writing a scene, for example, of two people right on a train, right? And they're having a deep conversation, and the wife wants to divorce her hubby, right? That would just be a scene where you would say interior train, and if it's day, what have you. And then it's brevity in terms of your description of what they're doing, seated in, 50% full train or whatever the case may be, quietly chatting amongst each other, and then you go right to the dialogue, right? You try to keep it brief and short because the director, the costume designer, they will all create that world. They'll create the visuals for you. The only visuals you need are those that are pertinent to the scene, right? And moving it forward. So if someone's drinking coffee and one of the characters drink and they spill the coffee on themselves, that's got to mean something. That's got to be pertinent to the scene and to push the scene and the story forward. If they spill coffee on themselves and it wasn't for the wife to reach out and touch him, for him to feel her affection, or for him to not receive any affection from her and his reaction to that, then it's not pertinent, so you don't need it. So you've got to think short, quick, tight, keep it flowing, and make sure that every scene has a beginning, middle, and an end, and every scene pushes the story forward.
Lori, did that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Jarrett. I'm just sort of curious more on writing, and so any other advice beyond that question would definitely be helpful. If you have any more advice.
Sharon, do you have more to add to that? Sharon?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. So I used to teach in the UCLA Writers Program, and we used to do in class, we would watch a film, but I would stop it after every scene. And I would ask the students, what do you know? And how do you know it? And so that began to help them to think not just in words, but in images, because it has to be that balance between the two. And so in that way, it usually took us, 3 or 4 hours to watch a full film in that way. But it goes to what Jarrett is saying about when you start to recognize how you are receiving the information as a viewer, it helps you to know how to write that when you're trying to when you are attempting to write a screenplay or a teleplay. And teleplays might be a little different because television's different than feature film, but it just bounces off of what Jarrett was saying about how knowing what to include verbally, what to include visually, and what is pertinent to giving the audience the information that you need them to know.
Yes. And with that said, in terms of giving them, you want to give it to them primarily through visuals if you can, right? And if it's more so through dialogue, that's fine. But avoid exposition as much as possible, right? If someone's in love with someone, if you have that person spewing all this, feelings towards another individual, if I, as an audience member or as a reader of your screenplay, if I'm not feeling that love in the scenes prior to that scene, you're wasting your time. You've lost me, because I need to have already felt that from that character, from either whether page 1 or page 5, whatever. And now on page 30, this person's heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for them, but you don't have to tell me, right? I know how they feel because I've seen the journey. So just think in that arena of, okay, my audience isn't dumb. I'm going to lay things out for them, and I'm going to allow them to come to their own conclusion. Of course, the conclusion that I want them to come to, but I'm going to allow them to connect the dots.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you, Sharon. Also, Jarrett, nice logo on your background there, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is.
Anthony had a question.
Says writers, do you have the script directions going? The best way to ask this would be, as you write your scripts, are you putting yourself in each scene as you go and describing that for the directors for the selling points? Or are you writing the complete script and then going back and adding the details of the scenes? For example, when you were on the train, your example of being on the train,
Right.
as you're writing, are you putting those details in, or are you going back later on?
So you're talking about like script structure then? Yeah, yeah. So scene settings will usually start with interior, exterior, and setting, and then there'll be a description, kind of maybe
Broad
a paragraph that kind of details the setting before the dialogue
I was
starts.
kind of wondering if he stops his thought process so much on the writing and focus more on the script settings thing. Maybe it's
So again, I didn't hear that.
It's hard to what I'm basically asking is, do you stop your imagination from writing as you're going to focus on those details, or do you come back later and throw them in?
No, I usually will write all of the details, but what you realize, you learn as you write, is that as you get more experienced, you skip the faux pas, right? You won't describe or over describe the train, right? It's just a train. It's the last car or the first car. It's somber mood and action, right? You stay away from when they were sitting in the train car, they could smell the coffee from the train up ahead, and they saw the beautiful woman with the perfume or the makeup that was kind of a peach. Nobody cares, right? That's in a book, right? You could do that in a book, in a novel. People love that, right? But not in a screenplay. The minute they find that you don't understand the craft, let's say you send your script into an agent or manager or what have you, and you're far too descriptive and there's far too much exposition, your script ends up in the circular file. Which back in our day was the trash can. and you had this 120-page script in the trash can, brads and all. Now, of course, it's a PDF file, and they just click the X and close it and send you one of those thank you but no thank you letters. So you really have to understand what it is you're doing. That means you need to read. You need to read screenplays, get your hand on as many as you can, to understand and read the good and the bad, right? Because if you don't understand the difference between the two, how can you create or perfect your craft? So read the good and the bad. Even when it comes to movies, watch good movies, watch bad movies, understand the things that you can't do and you shouldn't do, and welcome and embrace those things that work.
Make sense? Does anyone else have a question for Jarrett that they want to throw out there, or a topic of discussion?
Lori asked about a good screenplay to read. Lori, one of the best screenplays I've read was an adaptation.
You need to get closer to the mic, or they're not hearing you.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the best screenplays I read was an adaptation, and that was A Simple Plan. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a really great film, a great adaptation, because I read the book probably a year or two before I watched the film, and it was great. And the film was even better or as good as the book. So I would suggest that's one of the scripts you should definitely try to find on the internet.
Cool. Anyone else want to chime in with something? Oh, Court, yeah.
Well, what can I say? Well, first, when I was in film school, we all which was ancient times now, but we all studied Spielberg's screenplay for Close Encounters because it was so pure and so completely divided up. It's Close Encounters of the first, the second, and the third kind, and each one is 40 pages. Yeah, and it's just beautifully developed through there. So that's something I would recommend. I think something that didn't come up, which I find to be really different in films and television, is film has a lot more latitude for subtext. And so it becomes really important, sort of what you don't say.
Right.
And that makes the show don't tell even more important. And it's like, they say, directors, particularly directors, they don't say this about writers, but that you should take an acting class and learn to work with actors. And what I found, I had to do that, and I didn't want to be an actor or anything, but what I found was actors will tell you, I don't come out and play words, I come out and play behavior. So then that goes into your writing or your directing and all that subtext of saying, well, okay, how does this person feel? The script that Chris and I are doing now, I had seen between two officers, and I had to say a lot, and I had to say it in a scene. And in the first draft, we mentioned in the dialogues that they'd both gone to the academy, to the military academy, but not at the same time. And then in later drafts, we realized that, well, if we just made them have gone there at the same time, it gave them this bond, this band of brothers, and all of this stuff that the actors could then behave. And I didn't have to write all of that in the dialogue about, how much I like you and how we used to go drink and
because
all of that stuff.
They have a history now. And that's what
so yeah, that's kind of the advantage of it. TV is different because you're writing TV for both the 6-year-old and grandma. Everybody's got to get it. So there's a tremendous amount of dialogue because they're just constantly giving exposition on everything. Yeah.
Jared, you got a comment there.
One of the things, Lori, I just thought about, and Court, thanks for bringing up subtext. If you think about two characters, husband and wife, and let's say in the beginning of the script, you have the husband in the early pages setting the table for breakfast the next morning, and he does this 3 times up to page, say, 25. And he gets up in the morning, he prepares breakfast for his wife, right? They sit and have a good breakfast 3 times in a row, spaced out. And then on page 30, she says to him, I don't feel like you love me. Right? So he may not have said it, but through his actions, right, that tells us that he must love her, to get up every morning, to prepare breakfast for her favorite meal, and do all the little things, but yet he doesn't say it. So now he has to grow. She has to accept him for who he is, as well as realize that, he does love me. He does care about me because he's doing the little things to show me that he cares. So that's how you would do it in a film with subtext, as opposed to just, him saying to her every day, I love you, I love you, I love you. That it becomes white noise after a while. So if you show it, then it makes more sense, and it hits the heartstrings much more so when she says, I don't think you love me. And everybody who's been watching the film says, wait, no, he does. My husband doesn't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I add something?
Sure.
So from I mean, someone might get the idea that dialogue is not important in all of this,
Right.
and it absolutely is important.
It's critical.
You know, a lot something that is common in reading, you know, people at, oh, can you read my script? Every character sounds alike. You have to know who your characters are. Unlike Aristotle, who thinks plot is the most important thing. No, I teach that character is the most important thing. If you don't know who your characters are, then all your dialogue is going to sound like it's the same person. Aaron Sorkin. Oh, did I say that? No. So
True.
it is, you can convey character through dialogue, not through expository dialogue, but through how each character speaks. Their attitude and their way of being in the world comes through the dialogue you give them. So that's why it's important before you start. You know, you can have all kinds of story ideas about what might happen, but if you don't know who the people are who are in that, then you're not going to have a compelling screenplay. So I would say sit with, if you have this idea for a film, who are the people peopling this world, and get to know who they are, so that when you write the dialogue for each character, you know what words to put in their mouths. Right. And that comes from, as Jarrett said, as Court said, reading, watching, and, you know, pay attention to movies that you have felt are meaningful to you, so that you can get a grasp on how to write dialogue. So it's funny, dialogue is a falsification of natural speech that you have to make sound natural.
Yes.
Right? Because if you just recorded us and read this transcript, you'd be like, these people are crazy. So you have to falsify it, but then make it sound natural. So dialogue is a skill. You know, it's not just throwing words on paper. No. I hate you. Like, no, you don't, you know. So, you know, if you can blend all these things together that everybody is recommending. And again, like Rena said, it takes practice, and it takes listening to films. You know, When Harry Met Sally is so iconic because you don't confuse. You know who Sally is, you know who Harry is, you know who the two best friends are, because they each have a certain way of speaking that comes out in their dialogue as well as their behavior. So it's all of those things put together, and don't waste words.
Don't waste words.
We have just a few minutes left here, and we always give time for everyone to give their kind of final thoughts or one quick last question as we chime in. But first, Jarrett, want to make sure that you have an opportunity. We can either keep the cat in the bag, or you can tell us about what you've been working on for the past year or so since Maxi. Do you want to talk about your next project and kind of give us the scoop on what the plan is?
Yeah, we could talk about it a little bit. I can't give out too many details, but it's after visiting Klamath Falls, having such a great experience there, and driving around the town and meeting the people there, and just getting a lay of the land. I thought to myself, I always wanted to write a horror script, and so I did so, and it originates in Klamath Falls. And they travel up to Washington and back down. And Kurt and I have been discussing it. He read one of the drafts of the screenplay, and I'm looking forward to getting that set up. I've got a producer who's working to come up with some funding for it, and he looks like he's having some success, and a director attached to it as well. It's called School Bus Head, SBH. And it's based on a story that my father told me years ago. When he was a young man, he was teased and taunted because he had a very large oblong-shaped head front to back. And the kids used to, when they would ride the bus to school, the kids would sit behind him, call him School Bus Head, but then put their hands up at 10 and 2 and pretend as though they were driving his head as the bus made a left turn or a right turn. So of course it broke his heart. He was all bent out of shape about this. He tells me the story and I laugh. And he's like, "Why are you laughing? It hurt me." I was like, "I get it, but just the vision of kids behind you on a school bus driving your head was hilarious." So I took that little story and I created this character who is bullied. And one of the things that he's bullied about is the shape of his head. And as time goes on, he becomes a man and he takes revenge.
So the big news out of that, and of course, subject to change, and there's still a lot of factors involved, but we have a feature film that has been written about Klamath Falls that may be shot in Klamath Falls.
Yes. So we're excited about that.
You were talking at one point earlier about some historical thing you were doing down in Florida. Is that still happening, or is it all?
Yeah,
or what's up with that?
Still with the producer, and they're just trying to get actors attached. It's interesting because we were close to getting Will Smith to sign on to that.
Wow.
But after the
slap, the incident,
the slapping.
Yes.
He now wants to, because the guy that the film was about was a bad guy. At heart, basically, and Will wants to stay away from anything that shines him in a negative light. So I get it based on what happened.
Sure. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to give everyone an opportunity to kind of go around the table or go around via Zoom. If you have either a final quick question that Jarrett can answer, or if you just have a final thought that you want to share about tonight's conversation, that would be wonderful. And then we'll give Jarrett the floor at the end for whatever final advice he wants to give. So, Court, since we haven't seen you in a while, why don't we start with you? Do you have a final question or any final thoughts on our conversation tonight?
This was really nice. I've missed everybody.
We missed you, Court.
I was going to say, it is really nice to see you, Court.
Nice to see that things are, still rolling along and doing good. Good to see you, Jarrett.
Yeah, good to see you too, Court.
Not too much else, I can contribute from that. I wish we could do our film in Klamath, but if we get this thing financed, we're going to shoot it here in North Dakota, which is why I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
And Nina, since you've been patient in the background, do you have a final question or thought you want to share?
I don't have any questions or anything. I just wanted to say thank you, Jarrett. It was nice meeting you and hearing about your experience. And I look forward to seeing your School Bus Head movie. I love horror movies.
Oh, great.
So I'm very excited to see that. And thank you for joining us. It's great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Lori, do you have a final question or thought you want to share?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for making the time to be here, and I've really enjoyed listening and learning. I guess one maybe final question would be on dialogue, especially making sure that the dialogue fits a character. Do you find any helpful ways to test that out, like by you reading it out loud or by other people reading it and you hearing it, or is it, to really make sure that the dialogue is sort of fitting that each character and making sure that it's true to the character? If you want to.
Yeah, I think reading out loud does help, but I think more importantly than that is prior to actually putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard is maybe, writing down, okay, this character and some traits of that character, right? And these traits could be based on friends, people, voices that you've heard before, right? So that when you go and you put her name in or his name in, the character's name, and then you begin to type, you've got to hear the voice of that person that you think fits the mold of this character, right? So if the person is a prostitute, for example, they got to fit that mold. Okay, well, who do you know, or have you watched something on television? Are you familiar with people that live that life or have dealt with that life before? They need to speak and sound just like that. And that's how you differentiate your characters.
Awesome. Thank you.
Where do we see Maxie?
Oh, Anthony had a question. Where can we see Maxie?
Oh, yeah, Maxie is well, if you go to maxie2022.com, maxie2022.com, you'll find a list of streamers that are showing the film either for free with ads, of course, or you can rent it through Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and a few others, Vimeo as well. So that's where you would go to see it. And that's another thing we didn't touch on in the streaming aspect of it is how much you actually make, which isn't much at all.
Yeah.
One screening, maybe you make 80 cents if someone watches your film. So there's a lot of money that they need to discuss in the Writers Guild and the negotiations in terms of people being paid what they should be paid for your film, independent film, whatever it may be, streaming on these services, because there's ads. So obviously they're making money, and how much of that are they sharing with the filmmaker?
And if you are from Eugene or have just spent a lot of time in Eugene, you will recognize a lot of settings from Maxie. So yes, it was filmed entirely in Eugene. Yes. Oh yeah. Yes, Jarrett.
And Springfield.
Oh, and Springfield. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Josh, since you worked on Maxie and you've also been so patient, did you have a question for your coworker here, or just a final thought you want to share in our conversation tonight?
Yes, thank you for the information. That was pretty interesting, Jared. And I'm available for your next movie that you talked about on doing the music. If you're interested.
Oh, we'll certainly reach out to you, Josh.
He did the score for Maxie.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll start turning already for school bus head horror film revenge story in Klamath Falls. So you get to work on it, Josh. And Sharon, thank you so much for all of your insight as well tonight. I know you haven't had a chance to ask a question, but you've certainly given a lot of advice and interesting info. But any final thoughts you wanted to share?
Thank you. This is such a refreshing session. You can tell sessions that are not based in Los Angeles. This was no, I mean,
is that an insult or a compliment?
No, it's a compliment. It's rich. It's craft based. It's not like about self-promotion, etc. Plus, Jarrett is a very humble man anyway. But I just loved it. And again, I didn't know anything about Klamath. So it's just wonderful to hear about everything that you're doing with your community and beyond. So thank you for all your work. And Jarrett, keep going. You're an inspiration.
Oh, thanks, Sharon. Something that I feel as though a lot of the writers that were with us back in the 90s, I feel as though they lost out on an opportunity in terms of then versus today. I really wish that especially writers of color had the opportunities afforded to them now that weren't afforded to them back then. I think that like people like yourself, people like Danita, everybody extremely talented, had great voices, great stories to tell, but didn't get the mentorship and or the opportunity to fail and then later succeed. So
wonderful. Bowen, something you want to share?
I have no questions, not because I have any lack of them. Of course, I always end these sessions with exponentially more questions than I started with, but just wanted to say thank you all for the excellent discussion, the wonderful discourse. It's so informative and so invigorating to be able to talk to you all and hear from some very experienced and talented writers and people that are helping myself improve in my development of the craft as a performer, and really see how can I better, develop my relationship with writers and different aspects in entertainment, and build a robust approach to just the action of playing a character and behaving in the right way. So thank you.
Terrific. Chuck?
Jared, unless you inherited your dad's skull, and unless you're going to play the character, I'm afraid you're going to have to use a computer generated.
I'm curious on if you had a plan of utilizing like prosthetics of some kind,
Yes,
or
yes,
just
yes.
finding a cat or like an actor with a particularly shaped head.
Right. Yeah. The sloth in the Goonies, that was not actually his head and face.
Either way, I also will say is that when you're down here in Klamath, then whatever details get finalized, I'm also more than happy to help however I can.
Okay, great.
Owen has been a PA on several productions we've had in the area, as well as a ready and able extra. And we can talk about all that other stuff as we get close to the production. But if you do need local help, he's on the short list.
Gotcha.
Chuck, did you have something that you wanted to add, or?
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for changing the subject off of AI.
Hey, Aaron, is there something you wanted to add?
Well, just thank you for the conversation. It was good. I've actually dabbled in script writing a little bit myself years ago, and I have to say it inspired me to maybe dust it off a little bit, revisit it again.
Good.
My more practical question, though, I guess, maybe it's just for Kirk but the film festival that we're screening, is there a timeline when we have to get all those movies viewed?
Yes. So submissions are due by June 1st. You being winners, but both of you, as soon as possible, please. We will see an influx of films right up to and including June 1. People procrastinate, it happens. Expect somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 75 to 100 films when we're all done. So like I'm up to date, but I've been watching films as they came in since February. So please do, when you have time, or maybe just set a couple like an hour or two at night before you go to bed aside, maybe watch a couple of them and score them, because the sooner we can get those scores in, the sooner we can then pass along the next selections to our selection committee. And then as soon as the selection committee is done, then our judges can determine our winners. It's a train, and you're like the first car in the line. We have to make sure you stay up to speed. No, the filmmakers are not going to see those critiques. That's only internal. Right. Yeah, no, that's just yeah. But your role is very important, because as screeners, say if Melanie, if you hated a film and Aaron loved a film, you cancel each other out. And we're averaging out the scores. Okay. And then and then on that note, did you have any final thoughts for Jarrett or our conversation tonight?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I have to admit, I am new here, and I have never thought that much about the writer's side of things.
Yeah.
And now I have a different perspective, and I appreciate it. And thank you.
Well, great. Glad to hear. Thank you.
John?
Yeah. Well, I guess in one way, I just wanted to apologize to Jerry a little bit. At one point, he asked me when he was at the Maxi thing when we were doing it, Ross Raggy. So how'd you like it? And I said, well, I was kind of like, I don't, because of the profanity. It's just like every sentence, there's profanity. I can't take it, but that didn't want that to mean I didn't like you as I think that came off as I don't like you as a director. And that was not quite what I meant. I meant just that aspect I didn't like. But I thought you as a director, I was looking very much forward to what things you might do in the future that hopefully might have to be able to, that could avoid the profanity. I understand that because of Maxie and the subject matter that it kind of fits, but it is what it is.
Well,
It is what it is.
I do remember our conversation. And one of those things in terms of writing, and Lori, this kind of applies to what you're doing as well, is know your audience for that, and you write for that audience.
No, like I say, I think like you say, with that subject matter, obviously it fits.
Right.
No,
It's critical that the people that you want to watch, like the young people that I hope see this film, will not feel as though it's written by a 50-something-year-old man.
Gotcha.
I would want them to think.
I guess there's a part of me that's hoping that our youth are able to have conversations without every word being.
Yes.
Have you been around kids in the last 20 years, John?
Yes, they are,
Exactly.
but usually they're not on the street homeless with addiction problems.
Right.
So there's a very big difference.
My only thought to that is art is not entitled to make you feel comfortable, or is not expected to make you feel comfortable. And that very much so. And a lot of and of course, I actually remember we also had this conversation too, way back when we were also talking about Maxie. But either way, I really think that while vulgarity can also even be hard, especially for me to go through in certain times, in certain instances, I think it's also definitely worthwhile for it to be a part of it's saying something artistically, and it's really carving something out distinct for itself, because it dares to go that far. It dares to show that side of the human experience and those interactions, especially with those characters that are in dire circumstances and in dire straits, that things aren't going to be pretty.
Yeah.
It gets to a subject that, is very relevant in society today, even locally, with issues that are going on with our library, is that there's a thought process that everything has to appeal to everyone. And it's art isn't that way. Maxie is not for everyone but for the audience that it could appeal to, it's a very good film. Not every song has to be written to appeal to every single person. Not every book has to, but just because you may not like it or understand it doesn't mean it needs to be banned or suppressed in some way. It just may not be your thing. If you don't like a book, don't read it. If you don't like a song, change the radio station, right? But
objectively bad.
Right. Exactly. So it may just simply be a film that is not your thing, and that is okay. There is nothing wrong with saying, I didn't like that because I can't relate to it, or it doesn't appeal to me.
I just wanted to come across that. I thought that you were bad as a director because I do look forward, especially your historical thing. That really sounds interesting. And of course your school bus head. That's gotta be great, So I just look forward to other offerings coming from you. That's all.
Okay, great.
And then Anthony, do you have a final thought that you want to share? No.
I
Okay.
did want to say one last thing. Is for the screenwriting. Thank you for kind of helping me understand that it's the framework. Let them fill it in, right? And that's what it felt like you're trying to say, is when you're writing these screenplays, is that you need to leave room for it to breathe.
Yeah, that's how
for them to kind of let if you tell everything, the only counterpoint I have to that is it reminds me of Matrix, where the first movie they had totally they had etched out every little detail to the nth degree, whereas in the later film it was very much whatever, it will just go with the flow. And so, I mean, maybe in some respects, tighter control is worthy, and maybe in others it isn't. So I guess it's like that bicycle spokes analogy where it's well, how tight do you make them? Well, if they're too tight, if they're too loose,
Right.
It's the same way with this stuff, I would guess. So, I mean, would some kind of screenplays require, or would maybe need greater detail than others in some respects?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think of a film like you mentioned earlier, Lord of the Rings, that would require a lot more detail, right?
Okay.
Because you're creating a world. versus office building day.
Yeah.
Very different.
Like if I was writing for Blade Runner or something, you'd think that there would be a
Right.
lot. More.
Yeah, you'd have to describe, and because a lot of it is visual, and we have to see what it is that you're seeing. So yeah, it would take a lot more action, dialogue, a lot more sequences, just action sequences.
We're a little over time, but yeah, if it's real short.
Jarrett, if you could make it brief, discuss what it took to get as far as like something like Apple TV streaming, or just some type of example of the pathway.
Okay. So they've got there's indie rights and there's Film Hub, and these are all do-it-yourself distribution type of things. You upload your film, of course, it's got to pass quality control, and a ton of it has to do with audio. So make sure that when you shoot your film, whatever it is, that you have plenty of microphones, you have a boom mic, you have lab mics, you have everything you need so that you can get the best audio you can in order to make sure that you pass quality control. In terms of visuals, it's important, but not as important as sound. People will watch a film with great sound and poor visuals much faster than they will watch a film with great picture, but audio is scratchy. You can't hear it. There's too much noise. So audio is critical. So make sure you pay attention to that.
Thank you, Jarrett, and thank you, everyone. Solidarity to the writers, positive, good vibes to everyone on the picket line. Dame the man, save the empire, and all of that jazz. Jarrett, the floor is yours, sir. If you have any final thoughts you want to share or any advice.
Support the writers. This may take 3 to 4 months, I'm thinking, but be patient and support them. The actors and the directors, I believe, are in about 3 months. They too will go through negotiations, and usually that's when the studios come to the table because they don't want all 3 parties out. Watch Maxi if you haven't seen it yet. It would be great if it gets you to view the film, and you can send me a line on Facebook and tell me what you think, what have you, and thank you very much for having me here today. Really had a good time. It was very informative, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jarrett, and thank you to everyone who joined. As a reminder, we do this every month. We'll have a TBD guest for June. And Jarrett, thank you so much, not only for Maxi and having it in KIF, but also thinking of highly enough of us that you would want to then write a story about us. So thank you for that, and I look forward to continue to working with you on that project.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next month.
Okay. Bye-bye.